So thank you very much for having me today. As Owen mentioned, we are going to be talking about charting the path ahead and how revenue intelligence is really going to build a robust and resilient business for you and your sales team. Before we really get into that, I want to talk about this man here. This is Roger Bannister. He was the first human to be able to pass the 4-minute mile. In 1954, he hit 3 minutes, 59 seconds and 4/10. Incredible feat that happened in 1954. For decades before that, close to 70 years, people have been trying to get to this specific number of under 4 minutes. It was deemed impossible, absolutely impenetrable. But this man came along in 1954 and did it after numerous medical experts, sports experts said that conditions had to be absolutely perfect, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, no wind. They had to really kind of have the perfect conditions for this to actually happen. Roger Bannister put that to one side and thought of a different way to attack the training program to be able to get to where he needed to get to on that day in 1954. What's really interesting is that it only took 46 days. 46 days it took for the next person, John Landy, to be able to beat that at 3 minutes 58 seconds. The following year after that, 3 people surpassed that. And now since then, thousands have hit the 4-minute mile. What that really shows you is that this is not just a physical aspect to this particular sport, but it's also a mental one as well. And I think Roger Bannister's story here and beyond that really is so applicable to our business. So when we think about revenue intelligence, in my mind, ZoomInfo is part of the story of how we are breaking through go-to-market narratives and historical ways that we went to market and went to market to be able to try and close deals in the way that we're looking at doing it now. So when you think about successful sales tools of the past, we think about the traditional way to go to market and how we have created incrementality on being able to build upon what we used to do. Relationship, what was king then, it still is now. But the way that you build those relationships is entirely different. And those businesses that are adopting new methodologies to be able to create those connections are the ones that are going to win, especially in these difficult economic times. So whilst the Rolodex is quite apt in this particular instance, we're picking up the phone. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, an incredible movie if you haven't seen it, especially for salespeople, because it's going to make you chuckle so many times over when you hear those moments of whether it was how good the lead was or how good the salesperson was. Amazing. But in reality, a lot of the time of what we see to the hundreds of customers that I speak to on a regular basis, we still see that incrementality mindset on how to build upon what the status quo already is. And really you get to a stage of having so many different tools, you expect the tools to be the silver bullet to be able to give you the answer of what you need onto continuous growth, with having less budget as well. So we hear a lot of conversations to say, well, we don't have this kind of budget anymore this year. We have to find a different way to be able to do that. And what simply people do is that they reduce their spend without actually thinking about what the opportunity cost actually is. And when we look at today's world, and when I look at this versus 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, the landscape has totally changed in the new world of sales. People are using more and more tools. It's getting more and more confusing. In fact, sometimes now you get to the point of analysis paralysis. Like, how many sales tools can you actually analyze to feel like that you are making progress within your sales function? And if you just look at this slide here and think about all of the brands that you see, I haven't counted them up. There's probably hundreds on here already. And that's not including the ones that are starting to creep up now. But I bet you in a year's time, this is going to double in size, or this image is going to have a lot smaller icons of each of these brands that you can see on here. This is the complexity of how we have to go to market on a day-to-day basis. The decisions that you make are not just about how to close deals. It's about what tools that you can help you to close those deals. So when you think about this, I can appreciate how challenging it is to go to market today. And listening to some of the speakers that we've had on today's session, you can see that everyone has a different methodology or a different philosophy as to how you should go do that. But ultimately, there is one guiding principle for us at ZoomInfo and how we think that you should go to market. But the most important thing that you need to think about first is that what is your strategy? What are the tools that you have available to you today? And are those tools fit for purpose? Once you have figured that out, you can then start downstreaming and starting to figure out what a consolidation plan actually looks like. As you can see here, like from Smart Selling Tools, the average number of tools used by sales team has grown by 300%. That can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. Because on average, any one employee at a business is using between 80 to 100 apps at any one point in time. They say here between 25 to 27 sales tax stacks tools specifically. But actually, if you look at the larger picture of what one of your sellers has to do on a day-to-day basis, there is so much admin work that actually it reduces the amount of time that they can be in front of their customers. And so really what you should be thinking about is, how am I going to create an efficient go-to-market model, create revenue intelligence at a top-down approach to allow your teams to be able to deliver the best that they can. And the way that we think about that is about building a unified platform. Now you'll see some of the icons on the left-hand side here are brands that have spoken today or that are with us in the crowd today as well. Now, this is not to say that we are here to replace everyone. We're here to think about this as a concept of creating unification seamlessly across your tech stack today. So when we think about how ZoomInfo goes to market, we're not just a sales tool provider that gives you data or contacts, because you can give anyone a Yellow Pages book from the old sales world, because that's ultimately what it is. If you think of it that way, really what you are starting to think about now is about intelligence and how you go to market in a way that's going to create efficiency on a dollar per headcount basis. And the questions that you're going to be asking across your team are going to match across the revenue operations teams, to the go-to-market teams, and to the marketing teams as well. All of these questions ultimately are going to lead to the North Star that any single person on this call or any business is trying to achieve, which is, how do I achieve growth, particularly in economic downturn times? And when I think about revenue intelligence and the relationship of that between generative AI, I think what's really interesting is that AI has existed in the way that we go to market for many, many years. And then I think this back through to Roger Bannister, who ran that 4-minute mile. I almost think that OpenAI and ChatGPT was that 4-minute mile. And now you can see an absolute flurry of AI tools that are existing in the market today that talk about generative AI and how they're trying to create solve specific problems for you as you go to market. But what's interesting is that it doesn't necessarily always alleviate your challenges, because the one thing that is absolutely key when you go to market is all about your data and the data infrastructure. But the potential impact of generative AI, as based on a view from McKinsey, are based on two lenses here. One is on total economic potential and labor productivity. But I think McKinsey have missed one lens here. And that lens is that the opportunity cost of using generative AI when you don't have the core data infrastructure to support what your execution actually looks like. So according to ZoomInfo, this is how we look at our business, and this is how we talk to our customers, is about first understanding the strength of their data layer. Once they have established how good their data is in their business, and arguably we've seen this many, many times in any one CRM, there's probably a third of that data is just bad data, old, doesn't exist, duplicates, requires hygiene because the contact data is missed. For you to be able to get to the engagement layer at the top of that house, you really have to build the foundational layer first. Because ultimately what you're doing is that if you focus just on the tools without having that data layer absolutely spot on, you're effectively building a house with the roof first. And I think you guys know how that would go if you try to do that in real life. So when you think about what that actually looks like, it's the data quality that is going to drive the generative AI models that are going to give you the positive outputs that you need to be able to help you speed up, create efficiency, and almost think of things quite simply as the 3 V's: volume, value, and velocity. But the risk that the lens that McKinsey, I think, in my opinion, missed is this data quality piece. Because if you are pushing out content and messaging and trying to create personalization that is not relevant to the customers there, you're guaranteed to lose them, or in fact, not engage with them entirely at all. And the potential applications of Gen AI, these are just a few of them, but it has got incredible opportunity for us to use if it is used thoughtfully and with measure, from distribution of customer emails at a personal level, creating data insight for leaders like yourselves on the call today to be able to understand the value of where you should be focusing your time, building cold call scripts. And we just saw from the previous speakers about how you can use generative AI to create cold call scripts to be built as part of a video stream or a video response. Forecasting as well, which is so important to our day-to-day, is a massively powerful tool using generative AI to be able to understand the accuracy and what the margin of error actually is of when from lead to cash across a whole book of business that you guys are looking after. So with that in mind, I want to take a few minutes to pause speaking to listen to my very good friend and colleague, Ben Salzman, who leads up is our SVP of data strategy for ZoomInfo Labs, and is really talking about how we actually are all going to start applying AI in our business and how we're going to start sharing that with our customers too.
A lot of folks have probably seen that we've done a bunch of work to open source our go-to-market plays effort. So a lot of these plays are sort of horizontally applicable ideas that any company can run, right? Operationalizing intent signals or when the contact moves. And we have many, many dozens of these plays. One of the first places that we looked at for AI was basically feeding these scenarios to AI and saying, hey, what would you write if you knew the specific thing happening within this company, right? Someone is surging on a particular intent signal, et cetera. And you knew that these are the actions that we wanted to take. And we fed it a specific person at a specific company and basically said, with this premise, show us like what you would write. So we've actually published a GPT example for every one of these many dozens of plays. And what we realized was that the content quality was so high out of the box that, you know, this was really going to be something that could scale, right? And so you see that every one of these weaves in, you know, specifics about Amazon, specifics about the persona, and specifics about the scenario. So this is just an example of just like published data, or, you know, the published example for each one of these plays, but every company has a version of this, right? Like if you tell AI enough about the scenario and the company and the person, you're going to get something really good that is probably about equal or possibly better than what some of the folks who are sending that today, you know, are doing. So one thing that we did is we just tried to sort of democratize this for the entire org. So this is, you know, just a demo. A lot of this happens through APIs on our back end. But I want to show an example of sort of like a stylized version of like, you know, you have a company, you have a specific person in mind, you maybe know which tech ZoomInfo directly integrates with. And then we fed it all of this unique data around, like, here's the play, here's the contact's name, here's the channels, a whole bunch of metadata around how these come together. And we actually wired up the OpenAI API to basically say, I want to just have this spit out an email to each one of these companies. And so it's basically making a call to, and I just closed the window, of course. It's basically making a call to ChatGPT to say, okay, go out there and write an email to DocuSign, write an email to ADP, write an email to FedEx, and weave in all of this foundational data, like what their integrations are, what their role is, what their title is. And so, obviously this is going to happen at scale and in product, and I'll show you that in a second. But we also want to make it available to anyone at our org who can bring in structured data and say, based on these 20, 30, 50 parameters, what would GPT write? So it's a really exciting example of like pulling together something really quick that leverages the power of this and can weave in all that foundational data as well. And so, another area that we're seeing this work really well. So often we're helping companies to think about dynamic content. So how do they take their data layer and have it sort of inform what their snippet strategy would be at scale? So as an example, a lot of companies are building out the infrastructure to have industry-specific pivots, persona-specific pivots, persona-specific calls to action. And you can wire these up in your outbound tool to actually happen at scale to say, okay, if we know the vertical, then we know which reference customers to talk about. Let's do that out of the box. So as an example, and again, of course, we're doing this on a back end and a different than a spreadsheet. You can pull in a lot of these plugins where I actually have just entered my API key into this plugin, and I can basically go into any cell and say, okay, in this cell, let's reference X column and Y column, and basically run a query live that basically generates the content. So I can say, based on data that we've fed you, build a persona specific call to action for a product executive, and then have that scale across all the different personas. So we're able to basically use ChatGPT to generate all this content. Of course, we're upgrading it, massaging it, making it better. But then we're able to weave that into a tool to basically do a lot of this at scale. And so a lot of you are probably thinking like, okay, a lot of folks have probably seen that we've done a bunch of work to open source.
Ali, you're on mute. You're on mute. I think the speaker sounds...
Sorry, my apologies.
You're good. You're back.
Thank you so much. Just for conscious of time, there was a couple of more seconds left on there. But if you guys were excited as I was when I first saw that, when Ben presented it, please reach out to us.